Hi, Lisa. Thanks for being on my podcast. I can't believe you're back for the third time.
I am so excited to be with you, Jody.
I know. You know what? We met, 2019, I want to say, at a Hope Writers retreat. And then we became friends right away. And then you were on once, like right that very first year I launched the podcast. And then we came and launched Your Life Can Be Good Again. You can see it in the background there, that book, which tells of your story of losing your husband. And I'm going to have you share a little more about that. But your new book, oh, ladies, this is so exciting. God of Comfort. And you can see all my little tags in it because I'm loving it, Lisa. It's called A Devotional Journey, a devotional journal for the grieving heart. And I want you to kind of share what inspired you to write this.
Well, the story of my loss, and I know that we've recorded this, so I won't go into it. But I have seven children, and we are in the middle of a just very normal, busy summer. If you can imagine, seven kids going all the different ways. I was kind of the hub of the wheel, getting them there. Until one morning, I woke up to what I thought was my husband's just like having a nightmare, some funny breathing, and it was not. It was a nightmare. He was honestly in his last breaths. We had no signs, there were no symptoms, but I did all the things. I called the medics, I started CPR, 911 right on the
Mm.
phone. And yet I found myself 2 hours later in that room. You never want to go in at the hospital, and a very kind ER doctor telling us that they had worked on him for over 2 hours and they had never been able to revive him.
Wow.
And so there
I'm
I
so
was, like
sorry.
life. And I know so many of those who are listening to this may have a date where there's like a before and after. Like life was like this before, something happened, you never saw coming, and then you begin living out a whole life that you couldn't imagine. And yes, I had written my book, Life Can Be Good Again, but I knew there was even an earlier book for somebody in grief and a devotional. What I found was that there are myths in our culture. One of the myths is that there are these stages of grief. And if we will just tick them off, if we will just walk through them one by one, then that's the way through grief. And what I found, and just talking to so many, walking with so many through grief and ministry, is that grief is not a method, it's a
Mm.
person. And
Wow.
so I found that I had to park my hope, my everything, my prayers, my lament, all of that in God who is with us in our grief.
I love that. I love it. It's not a method. It's a person. It's a who. It's not a person. It's God, but it's a who. Yeah, you say I have it written. You said the way through grief isn't a method or prescription. The way through grief is a person. God of all comfort. Hence the title, God of Comfort. I love that quote from your book. So, for those of you that don't know all of Lisa's story, I recommend going back and listening to the episode we recorded. I want to say that was in 22 or 23, Lisa, when your Life Can Be Good Again book release, and it's so powerful. And I'll link it in the show notes. But I want to talk about right away in chapter one. You start off with this. What are the best three ways to say to someone who's grieving? Like, what are the best three words if someone's grieving? Like, what should you say? Because most people don't know what to say. Let's keep it real. They're like, and so, and when you asked that, I stopped for a second before I kept reading. I'm like, what would I say the best three words were? So I was thinking, like, I'm so sorry. Like, that's what came to my mind. So then I kept reading, and you had that as one of the examples. But then the radio host said what they are. I'm going to let you share what they are. And then you have examples of how these words are in the Bible and how God says these to us. And so you can just maybe share a couple but I just, this was powerful. I don't, I just realized these are important words to say to someone that's hurting.
Yeah. So a radio host was asking this question, and I thought that too. I thought, was it let me help, or I'm so sorry? We say that so often in grief. But he said these are the three best words. And when you hear them, you'll say, of course they are. Um, you're not alone.
So powerful.
We cannot fix somebody's pain. Nobody is expecting you to show up, waltz in, and fix their pain. So take that off your plate or your responsibility. That is for God to do. God is the healer. You can sit with somebody in pain. And just
Mm,
even if you haven't been through their particular pain point, just showing up and saying, you are not alone. I see you.
powerful.
Be a
Yeah.
listening ear. Yeah, and God, what I realized was that not only can we say that to one another, but God says that to us all through scripture from the beginning. I think Matt Chandler said recently from the beginning of Genesis to Revelation, the whole book is a book about the Bible's a book about us not being alone. God saying, you're not alone. I am with you in the garden. And then, through Jesus, he actually, the name Emmanuel says God with us. And then when Jesus returns and ascends back to heaven, he says, I am with you to the end of the age. And then in Hebrews, he says, I will never leave you or forsake you. In Isaiah, he says, I will go with you as they go into the promised land. So from the beginning to the end of scripture, God has said to us, you're not alone. And that is never more true than we were when life is imploded and lost and we feel alone. We feel like nobody can understand. Nobody really understands what I'm going through. God does. And He is with us in
Mm.
it.
Yeah, it's so true. And you know what? I think that feeling of loneliness, we were just talking about that. Again, I'm reading this still. I haven't finished the book, but there's 50 devotionals. And this morning I read the one that says God sustains. And it's funny because we hadn't put that in the like prep stuff, but it was so powerful. You talk about the ache of loneliness because there is such a feeling of loneliness and grief. And especially when you've lost someone, like you lost your husband, that person that you do life with, and so we talk about in the book, you talk about how nighttime was always so hard because, you're busy with the hustle and bustle of the day with the kids. I mean, 7 kids, Lisa, you're all busy, busy. But then at night, it's like you finally sit alone. You used to love your alone time. And now it's like, I'm sitting here alone. And that loneliness is so real. And you can't really experience, like, you can't really understand it till you experience it, till you have walked it. I remember this, my story is a little bit different than yours. I went through a divorce, but I just, the loneliness part, especially as my kids got older, and it was really hard. And so you talk about the God who sustains. So I know this wasn't what we talked about, but that chapter really like connected with me this morning. Just, that what is that sustaining grace like? Like, I don't know. I just loved what you shared in there. Do you remember anything you can share from that devotional?
Yes. Yes. And that loneliness comes, whether you've lost a child, a
Mm,
parent, a friend, a sister, a sibling, for me, a spouse, even you in your situation where there was death of your marriage and you had,
yes.
lost that relationship. That loneliness comes because the person we would have gone to, the person we would have called, the person we would have shared these moments with is not there any longer. And I never knew that loneliness could be like physically painful. You could cut
Yes.
it with a knife. And we can turn to so many things. Listen, we can turn to so many things. I think loneliness is part of what drives us to like self-medicate, in very unhealthy ways, or try to mask it, try to just like, we're gonna go to Disney and so I don't have to feel this pain. Um, Not that there's anything wrong with having a good day off, but we can try to mask it or escape it. What I found was that God not only saves us with his grace, we talk a lot in the church about his saving grace, his redeeming grace that, because Jesus went to the cross and it paid for our sins that we could never pay for, that we now are back in relationship with him and have hope of eternity. But there is also a sustaining grace. And the
Mm,
sustaining grace is um, gets us all the way home to heaven through whatever it is. We see this with Paul, and Paul had a thorn in his flesh. We don't know what it was. Was it a physical thorn? Was it a person? Was it mental anguish? We don't know what it was. But because of that, we can kind of fill in the blank with what we are going through, pain we're experiencing. And God didn't, I mean, Paul begged if anybody could pray hard prayers, it was Paul and effective prayers. But God heard his prayer, but he said, I'm not going to take it away. I'm going to sustain you in it.
wow.
And you know what? Paul got to see, and so do we, part of God's grace that we never would otherwise. If we never went to that place where we were desperate, we couldn't make it through that night alone, um, we would never understand God's sustaining grace. And when I look back now, Jody, like if you were to say, well, what did that look like? How did that feel? What did God exactly do? I can't explain it. All I can
Mm,
say is that breath by breath, moment by moment, God got me through. Sometimes that looked like just going to bed early or maybe Netflix and chill or crying myself to sleep. There were,
yes.
reading a book. There are a lot of things we can do. All I can say is look back and see that God sustained me through each moment until that grief got softer and less hard.
Yeah, I love that you said that because it's hard to put it into words. I feel the same thing. I felt like the Lord was with me in a way I never experienced before. When people tell me, all I can say is the word intimacy. There was this intimacy with the Lord in my grief that I thought I had a strong faith before, but it was just different. It was like I guess I had never depended on him like I did in my divorce. I just needed him in a way I never had needed him before. And that sustaining grace, those are the words. I mean, if I could put it now, that was what I was feeling. He was sustaining me. He was giving me strength for each day, for each hour, sometimes each minute when we're just really struggling. And it's just so beautiful that that's what I read this morning. And I just,
Yeah.
God wanted us to talk about it today. So you have so many good ones. I mean, 50 devotionals. I love how they're broken down. They're all on a character attribute of God. So each one is God and then something. And to me, that's so important because really, He is the one that's going to help you through the grief, right? There is no other person or thing that's going to get you through it. It's your relationship with the Lord and depending on Him and seeking Him. And so it's beautiful the way you wrote it. And so one of the ones I loved, again, I love to talk about broken pottery. You know, when I went through my divorce, I just felt shattered and broken. And so you have one called God the Potter. And I immediately, when I went through the table of contents, I went straight to that one, Lisa. That was the first one I read. And it is so good, you guys. Like, oh, I just think there's something about when you have something in your life that's meant so much to you, like trees and pottery are kind of my two things, then it just means so much when I read something about, in the Bible, it talks about God is the potter and we are the clay. And so you have a cousin who is I don't know what the word would be called, like ceramic artist, I guess is what you
Yeah.
call it.
Mhm.
And this is what the quote says from the book. You said, when she begins molding the clay, there's always a struggle until the clay surrenders to her hands and she's able to shape it into what she wants. I mean, I just sat with that for like, wow, surrender, right? And then it goes on and you talk about the importance of the heat. So, can you just share all this amazing stuff from this chapter? It was mind blowing to me. One of my favorites.
Yeah, so I interviewed my oldest son who had taken pottery classes in college, and then my cousin who is a beautiful ceramic artist. And I didn't say, "Hey, draw some analogies for me." I just said, "Hey, tell me what it's like. Tell me what it's like to shape clay and to make pottery pieces." And man, as they spoke, boy, could I see the analogies coming. And at one
Mm.
point, we talk about the pottery when it's all shaped and the potter has it just like they want. They have to put it into the kiln, right? Well, that kiln is so important because it has a precise heat. And if it is too low, well, the clay will not harden correctly and it will just break. And when you go to India, I have a friend who was a missionary in India and they would just make these like hand done like clay pots that they would drink out of and they would just throw it on the street. It was not kiln hardened. And so it was just, breakable. But if that kiln is too hot, it is also going to ruin the pottery. It will also shatter and break. And so that heat has to be just right so that it will harden that clay and it will be usable, but it won't shatter it. And
Mm.
then something else that I found when I was researching pottery, and I can't explain how this happens, I'm not a chemist. The heat actually changes the molecular structure of that clay. And I
Wow.
thought that is what God does in us. If we will allow Him, if we give Him like our story that is the lump of clay, it's not what we wanted, does not look like what we wanted, man, He will shape it more like His Son Christ. He changes
Mm.
us from the inside out. And I just thought,
Mm.
wow, this kiln that changes the molecular structure of the clay so that it becomes a beautiful, usable piece of pottery.
Yeah. And no one wants the heat, right? I mean, if you think
Yeah.
about heat in our life, those are the storms, those are the hard things. And we just want it to always be like perfect or easy, but that's not going to help you grow. That's not going to help you become a better person, more empathetic, more compassionate. I mean, you're just going to stay status quo. And you know what? For some people, they're fine with that, but that's not what God has planned for you. And so He uses these things that heat you up, right? The hard things in life. And that's kind of the message of my book, like growing the deep roots. It's we
Mm.
want that depth, but really it happens in the hard seasons of life. And no one wants that. But I look back and think of who I was before my divorce and who I am now. And I'm like, I don't think I'd ever want to go back to that other version of me. And I'm sure you have seen your growth and your depth. Now, it doesn't mean pain is what we want or pain is fun or pain, we wish it on anyone. It's horrible, but pain is inevitable. I mean, it says in the Bible, you will face trials, not if you face, it says when you face trials. So if we can look at it with that different perspective, which I love that you have journaling as part of your thing at the end of each uh, devotional. There's a prayer and then a journaling prompt. Now, tell me how journaling helped you. It was a huge help in my journey. Was it something that you were able to get your feelings out? Like, tell me the importance of journaling for you.
Yes. So journaling was huge. I was not much of a journaler before, to tell you the
Me
truth. I mean, I
neither.
didn't,
Yeah.
I was like, who has time for that? You know, seven kids, you're just on the go. But the thing about walking through any kind of loss is there are so many hard emotions. There's so many questions. There's so much that can just get bottled up in us. And it's too much for any one person. Like to call a friend and try to dump this on them is just too much for any person, even if you have your spouse still or it's too much. We're meant to take it to God. And so journaling really became a way to unburden my heart. I would get alone in my minivan every morning. I say some people have a prayer closet, but I have a minivan. And I would get alone with God every morning, just shutting those doors. Kind of gave me, nobody could come in and slip a note under the door, interrupt me. But I just can furiously write out, what I was feeling, just my fears, my questions. And it wasn't so much figuring it out as just getting it out.
Hmm.
And that is written lament. Honestly, so much of the Bible is lament. And we see that in the Psalms. We see that in Lamentations. The entire book of Lamentations is written lament, both communal laments and individual laments that Jeremiah pens under the Holy Spirit. But yeah, journaling was huge. And also we know now science, of course, is caught up with scripture and tells us that there are huge benefits to all journaling, but especially grief journaling. And so it just, it lowers our stress hormone. It just helps us focus on purpose and helps us focus kind of on gratitude and what is true, not the lies that come. And so
Yes,
we
so
built
good.
that in. And I was so glad my publisher not only included journaling, I wrote journaling prompts after each devotion. When they laid the book out so beautifully, they left journaling space. So this is an
Yes.
interactive book. You can be sure that if you pick it up, if you give it to a friend, this is something for them to work through. They're not just going to passively read it. They are going to be able to read this devotion, connect with scripture, and then be able to work out, what they're going through and unpack
Yeah.
that devotion in their life.
I love that there's places to write in it. I think it's so good. For anyone that's going through grief, you need to get this. And if you have a friend, this is such a beautiful gift that you can give them. This will help them so much along their grief. I think journaling, I didn't really think I knew what I was doing. Now that I look back and understand lament more and all, I mean, I don't think I could put that word to it when it was happening, but that's what I was
Same.
doing, you know? And
Yes.
so, and it was so therapeutic. And sometimes you can't always verbalize it, but then you're something about your hand just starts writing and it all comes out and you're like, oh yeah, that's how I feel. But it's I don't know. That's at least I felt. Did you have that experience ever where it was like you
Yeah.
couldn't?
I mean, it bubbles up to the top. It's one way to express what's going on. And God invites us to do that. That's the thing is that we're not meant to carry this. That's part of the you're not alone.
Mm,
Like he invites us to come to him. And the process of lament is actually like unburdening our heart to him, our heart emotions, our hard questions, laying that down. And like I said, not figuring it out, picking up his trust, saying, but
mm.
I trust you, God. We see that all through the word again. Leviticus 3:21 says, yet I still dare to hope. It's like lament, 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 lament. These things are happening, my afflictions and this and that. And then it turns in verse 21 of chapter 3 of Lamentations, that verse that we all quote and have on our t-shirts, yet I still dare to hope. Great is your faithfulness. Your mercies are new every morning.
Yes. I love that there's always a connective word like yet or but, you know. So I think it's important to get all out, but then turn it and say something you know about the Lord. You know, for me, it was always the Lord is close to the brokenhearted. I love that verse in Psalms 34:18. But something, so there's a, you know, you're getting out how you're feeling, but then there's a final, Lord, I'm going to trust this attribute. And you could pick something from the book. There's so many things that I'm going to trust this today, God, that you are my strength. You are sustaining me. And the other one I loved is God unchangeable. And you know what? This one, you talk about grief in a way I never heard it talked about, the way you describe it. Like grief is like this. I'm going to let you explain it. But it was so like, you know, I've read a lot of grief books and I just loved this picture of how you describe grief. And then I thought we can talk a little more about these changes that happen in our life, but that God is unchangeable. But can you describe it? Do you remember what you wrote?
Sure. Yes. When I was a little girl, I used to love to rearrange my room. Like I went through a phase. And one of the things I'd love to do, I would drag my furniture and my bed. I would kind of create a room within a room. So when you opened my door, you had to like go through a hallway of furniture to get to my bed.
That's
My poor
cute.
mother. like she would open the door unsuspecting and boom, like she'd be greeted by, like she'd have to figure out how to get through this room that had been, reset, rearranged. And I said, grief is like somebody came in and rearranged furniture of our life because the
Mm,
shell is still there, but everything is different. Home is different. Our rhythms are different. Our family relationships and the way it's just all changed. And so
mhm,
finding that God is unchangeable in in our in our life that has been so massively changed is an anchor for us. And we can just cling to that. And that's kind of the beauty of going to, like you said, looking to God and saying these truths over and over again, because it anchors us in these unchangeable truths of who God is. I don't have strength today. And the person I would have gone to like lean on in this is gone. But God, you are my strength, and that won't change. And
mm,
I don't know I don't, life doesn't feel good right now, but you are unchangeable. And you promise your good does not start and stop. And so I will lean on that and look for the good in my life, not just as
mm.
an anchor as we walk through this, shattered life.
Yeah, so good. Yeah, I'm like picturing someone coming in and redoing your whole house and you have no, like, you don't get to say where you want this stuff to go. It just, everything just changes and you're stuck with it. And like the way you described it, I was like thinking, oh, that just describes it because it wouldn't be the choice you would have made. The person that is now gone, like it just described it so beautifully. And I think that like change is hard because when you go through grief, there will be changes. So sometimes your friendships will change. Sometimes people don't really know how to enter into it with you, or your relationships change. Maybe you're not invited to things you used to be invited to. I'm sure you experienced that, Lisa. I did. I just think change is going to happen. Like grief,
Mhm.
change in just you personally, but also just change in what's happening in your life.
Mhm.
It happens.
Finances
So
can
then some,
change. You may have to move from your house. Yeah.
yes, yes. There's so much. So then it's like, well, I don't want to do that, And so I do think this God unchangeable, it's a beautiful attribute of the Lord to cling to when your life is feeling so much change and you're struggling, right? Like you said, I know God is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow, and I can cling to that. And Lord, I don't understand why I'm here, but I know you are the same. So I'm going to come to you with it. It was just a really powerful one. And I just think that if you are going through grief and things are changing, first let me say you're not alone, right? You're never alone. But yes, that happens to a lot of us. And I know too, going through a divorce for me, like, you don't go to as many couple things anymore. And maybe you experience this too, just even as a single woman through your husband passing. People are like, oh wait, this is kind of an event. I used to invite the husband and wife. Do I still invite? And I had a neighbor friend so sweet that invited me still. And I love that then I could choose. Do I get to go, do I want to go or do I want
Mhm.
to not go because I'll be the only one there that's single. But they gave me the choice versus deciding for me. And so, but I do think there's a lot of change, and it doesn't have to, maybe even like someone that lost a child, think about the change there. Now you're not going to the events, and it's hard. Change is hard. So I just wanted to speak into that because I think grief is hard all along, but these are the ripple effects of it. So right away, there's these emotions that are happening, but then there's changes in your, um, what's the word I'm looking for? Just who you hang out with and just the way your rhythm of life looks changes too. And so
Yeah.
that one was such a good one. I mean, they're all good. I'm trust. I have to choose some to highlight, but Lisa, they're all good. Okay. I want to. Do you have a favorite one? Did you have one that just when you wrote it was
I
like? I know that's a hard question to ask since you're the author of the book.
I do have a favorite one. And my favorite one talks about unseen grief, God who sees me. And
Mm,
it starts off saying, not everyone gets a casserole in grief. Not every griever gets a
so good.
casserole. And I know you've experienced this, Jody. And
I
even
have,
if
yeah.
somebody, our house was full, our house filled with people that day and for the week, our friends and family were so good. But I've walked with so many who have grieved, the relationship was way more than just uncle or grandfather or friend, and people just can't understand the nature of the loss. Or, I've shared in my own life that we had a stillbirth in our family. Most of that
Mhm.
grief will go unseen for my son and daughter-in-law as they walk through that. Only a few people knew, even though that she was very far along in her pregnancy. And most of them will, it will disappear from their radar. And so she and they will walk through so much of that unknown. maybe you were, distant from the person. You couldn't even attend the funeral, or there's just so many ways that maybe there's a story connected to it where you've learned things in the loss that have just made it a totally different story. And now you feel like nobody really understands or sees your grief. And God does. He absolutely
Mm.
understands it. And I looked at the story in Luke 7, I believe it is, of Jairus and the woman who reaches out, the woman with the blood condition
With the
for
blood.
12 years.
Yeah.
And Jairus was like this public official. He was the synagogue ruler. He could, his daughter was dying. He could come very boldly to Jesus in the center of these people and say, "Come heal my daughter." But in that crowd was somebody who didn't dare to speak out her grief, because if
Mm.
she did, she would not even have been allowed to be there. It made her unclean, having a bleeding condition, and she surely would not have reached out to touch Jesus. And so, this with this condition, she had spent all her money trying to be healed. She had nothing left. She reaches out and touches the fringe of Jesus's, we say the hem of his garment, right? Touches the fringes of his prayer shawl. And Jesus immediately knew who touched me. He stops.
Mm.
And he could have kept going. He could have said, well, she's healed. That's fine. I'll keep going. I've got this mission to help Jairus' daughter. But he stops. He turns into the crowd. He says, "Who touched me?" And he knew who touched him.
Mm.
He was not looking for an answer to that question. He was looking for this woman. And
Mm.
she stood up and said, "I touched you." And he said, "Oh, daughter, your faith has made you well." So
Mm.
just to say, you are not just a part of the crowd. God knows who you are. He knows your specific condition. He knows how long you've been hurting. He knows exactly how to heal you. And he will turn and focus himself on you, focus his gaze on you. Your grief
Mm.
is not unseen.
Wow, that's so powerful. Yeah, he basically, when he turned and said, "Who touched me?" was saying, "I see you," kind of giving her validation. Like,
Yes.
I know you were trying to do this in secret or quiet, but I want you to know I see you and you're valued. You don't need to be hidden right now. I want to point out to you that everyone here, this is someone of value, and you woman of faith, you are healed. It's
I
beautiful.
love
And I
that,
do
Jody.
think there are some, I wrote it in my book, I call it A Death Without a Funeral, because there are some, like your um yeah, infertility, divorce. I mean, there's so many things, and I'm not sure with your son and daughter-in-laws with the stillbirth, but there's things that people don't understand, or they don't even know how to enter into it because it's like, how do I even go and offer support or help? And so you feel very alone or unseen in it. And so I think that chapter sounds so helpful to someone that's like, even though maybe others aren't seeing you or maybe others aren't entering into it, you are still the Lord of the universe sees you and wants to walk beside you through this grief with you. I just love that
Yeah.
one. Wow, so good. And that story always is so powerful. The woman who touches him and with the bleeding, because you think about it, she wouldn't should not have been in that crowd, right? But she had
Yeah.
the faith to do it. And so I love that. Well, I wanted you to read an example of one of your prayers. I love the God is my strength. You talk about being tethered to God. And I just love the wording of that, tethered to God and how he's our strength. So I thought you could just read it if you don't mind. It was so powerful. I just want people to hear an example of your prayers. They're really beautiful. And this one was one I really loved.
Yes, and I know the word strength means a lot to you from your own writing in your own book.
Yes.
So a prayer to God, my strength. Dear God, I cannot handle my grief on my own. I may look strong, but you know my utter weakness. Keep me tethered
Mm.
to you through your word, prayer, and worship, so that I have your strength to walk out each step of this grief. In Jesus' name, amen.
So that is so good. I love the tether to God. I think it's so powerful. And I just, you're right. That word strength is a really important word to me. So again, that was another one. I'm reading the whole book, but get ready for this interview. I picked out certain ones, and God is my strength was one that I obviously went right to because that word strength is important to me. But you have something else in the book that is so special. You have poetry. You wrote this poetry, right? These are your handwritten poems in the book.
Arm?
You know what, Lisa? They're so good. So there's two of them I want to highlight, and they're all wonderful, but these two really spoke to me. And one is called Is It? And it's based on the common phrase, it is what it is, which people say all the time, right? So you're going through this, it is what it is, or you have this, it is what it is. And you change the words to something really powerful. And you kind of question, is it? Is it really true? It is what it is. So I wanted you to share the three words, and then you could read the whole thing, or you could just read that one paragraph. where it talks about the it is part. But I just it was so good.
So to set this up, I was in the car. I say that all the time too. And now I have to catch myself having written this, but I was in the car one day with my youngest daughter. She was a teenager, I believe. And I said, "It is what it is." And she said, "Is it, Mom? Is it?"
Wow.
And it just was such a shift for me. Nobody had challenged me on that. And so I went home and began to think about these words and I wrote it. Yeah, there's a whole poem, but I'll read the last paragraph. It
Okay.
is what God says. He gets the last word. Press on with fresh faith, for He loves you so, and one day will show that nothing's been wasted.
I love that. So it is what
Mm.
God says. You know, it's funny. It's something someone in my house says all the time. And I'm always like, oh, I can't stand the saying. I don't know why. I just feel like it's like no empathy at all. And it's like, it is what it is. It's like, come on, let's have empathy is a big thing. I value empathy a lot. So I loved this. So now when someone says it, I always go, no, it is what God says. I think that's like a great version of a better version of that saying. And so that one was so good. And the whole poem is so beautiful. And I love that you wrote them. I wasn't sure if you had gotten these somewhere from someone else, but the fact that you wrote these is even more beautiful, Lisa. Okay, we're gonna talk about the grief card. And you end the book with this one. This is the last part of the book, right? Before it goes into
Yes.
acknowledgments. I think so.
Mhm.
And I think it's just a great way to end it. And you talk about there is a garden and that certain things you can allow grow. And so there's two different ways people can go with grief. You can be bitter and struggle, or you can go to God. I mean, you can always struggle still in both scenarios, but like one, you get grow deeper in your faith by turning over to the Lord more and seeking Him and using this book as a guide to look at all the characters of the Lord. And one is just to kind of walk away from your faith and become bitter. And so I loved the way you worded it. I'm not doing justice. The poem's way better. So I'm gonna have you read it as kind of our closing of the book. And then of course I'll ask you my favorite question I always love to ask about books. But I this one was so good. This one I'm like, I want you to read the whole thing, if you don't mind.
Okay. It was inspired by Psalm 126, which the final verses of that poem, of that psalm, verses 5 and 6 say, "Those who sow," now I'm going to paraphrase this, "those who sow in tears will reap with songs of joy. Those who go out weeping, carrying sheaves, will return with, or carrying, we'll return with sheaves." It's a picture of sowing in tears, of continuing to
Mm.
plant in this place of tears, and the promise that it's God who will bring us songs of joy. So this is what I wrote: the grief garden. What's growing in your grief garden? Though the landscape may look bare, too rocky for anything to take root, we each have seeds we plant each day. Weeds of regret become stalks of despair. Weeds of anger grow shoots of bitterness. Weeds of isolation produce resolute apathy. And weeds of resentment yield fruit of distrust. But seeds of gratitude bear blooms of contentment. Seeds of
Mm.
lament bring clouds of compassion. Seeds of surrender reap a heart peace. And seeds of trust foster flourishing faith. What's growing in your grief garden? In soil broken open and watered by tears, what seed are you planting today?
My goodness, it is so good. You guys, we don't want you having seeds of regret and seeds of anger that become bitterness. That you can have anger in grief. That is a normal emotion, but we don't want that to be what's growing in your garden. We don't want you stuck in the anger and stuck in the regret. There is a point in time where you will switch from what God or why God to what now? What can I do with this? And I love the other choices of seeds of gratitude and seeds of lament. And that's the place where God can take your grief and use it and help someone else. And I think that's such a beautiful thing that I've seen in my grief. And I know you have too, Lisa, that when we take our broken pieces, that broken pottery, and we say, Lord, use it. Like, I don't want to become bitter. I don't want to become um, I don't want this grief to make me change me for the worse. I want it to change me for the better. So, God, whatever that looks like, I surrender it, right? That word surrender, and I give it to you and use it. And then that garden, the seeds are going to grow and you're going to help someone else. You're going to come alongside someone else. And you've come along so many women. You have a ministry that helps wives that are grieving the loss of a spouse. And you have done this and it doesn't take the grief away to where you're not sad anymore, but it gives it purpose. And I just love that grief card. I thought it was, we have a choice, right? We have a choice. Which way we're going to have everyone's going to walk through grief. There is
There's
no
no
one that goes,
neutral. There's no
there is,
neutral. We are sowing something.
yes.
I I want the one who's listening to this, who is walking with somebody or maybe walking through grief, to think, I want to do more than survive this. Like a lot of people survive. We want to
Mm,
thrive again. What's going to be in that garden? You will. I can promise you, you will. But we have to do the hard work of grief, and we can't rush it. It takes so much time. But let me guarantee you that what you are sowing, God will use, and He will not waste it. Just like you said, Jody, He will not waste it.
mm. I love that. There's no neutral. You're making a choice one way or the other, right?
Hmm.
And that is so powerful. And that to me was such a great way to end your book. It was so beautiful. And I love that so much. And I love that you wrote that, Lisa. Lisa, you have a gift of writing poetry. I'm gonna predict that maybe there's a poetry book coming in the future. I hope there one is because you are really good at it. And there's something about it that's different than just writing a devotional, right? There's something about people entering into it because it just touches you in a different way, poems. And I don't know, it was really powerful. I haven't read again, I'm still working my way through the book, but I am loving every time I read one, I'm always like, that's my new favorite. But you can't have a new favorite every time. But I think it's so good. And I wish I had a book like this when I was going through my divorce and going, and actually now I'm grieving the loss of my dad, and it's been about a year, but I am finding that I'm still having lots of grief. And so I'm kind of using this now as a way to help through that. But I just wish that, you know, again, this is a beautiful, beautiful gift you can give someone. If you know someone that just lost a loved one or is walking through a miscarriage or a stillbirth or infertility, or there's so many griefs we walk through. There's more, so many. I can't name them all, but this would be a beautiful gift to them that will give them hope and give them encouragement in the middle of it. And books are important. As you can see, I books have changed my life. They have really helped me grow. And so I guess that's my last question. I always like to end it with, which books besides the Bible have changed you the most? Now you've been on 3 times, so you've changed a bunch. So is there anything new since I
Oh,
guess
I'm trying to
22 that
think.
you've read?
Did I probably shared Hide and Speed on High Places last
You
time, because
did.
that's
You did.
probably my all-time favorite. But I think the book that really first introduced me to lament, now there's Dark Clouds, Deep Mercy, which is a
Mm.
wonderful book on lament. But before I found that book, I found one by Esther Fleece Allen called No More Faking Fine. And her story is very different. She didn't have so much a loss of a person as she had a very disruptive childhood, very, very difficult childhood. And so that kind of caught up with her in adulthood. And it was her writing a chapter on lament, and a counselor really speaking into her life and saying, this is like, you have permission to lament this.
Yes.
That really opened my eyes to, yes, just like you said, like I was kind of already doing that, journaling and praying and then opening the word and re-anchoring in the trust of God and who God is. But I didn't know to call it lament. And to see that this is a practice that God gives us was just, I cannot tell you that it helped me say, okay, like I can't control a lot in my grief. And there I
Mm.
can't control my emotions, but I can control what I do with them. And if I keep working, how do we work through grief? Well, if we keep doing this process of lament, then I know that eventually God will continue to move me forward in it.
Mm. So no more faking fine. And who was the author?
Mr. Fleece Allen.
Okay,
Yeah.
fabulous. Now I have not read that one. I love Dark Clouds, Deep Mercy. I actually had Mark on the
Yeah.
podcast, which was such someone had shared that one with me. Again, I did not have that book when I was talking through my grief. And little did I know I was lamenting. And when I didn't, again, like you said, I didn't know. So I love that we're putting language to this for someone that's in the middle of it or even at the beginning of it. Like this is one of the ways. And God gives examples in the Psalms. Like David laments in such a beautiful way. So you can actually go read that as well to get more examples. But Lisa, you have just been a wealth of knowledge for people that are going through grief. And your Instagram, I'm going to do a shout out to you on that. You have the most amazing, like I share a lot of your stuff. I like you know how you can share it in stories because it's just that good, you guys. I mean, she just has these quotes and these things. And so if maybe you're at a place where you're like, I just need something, start there. But I say this is like a go-to book, and I'm going to be getting it for a lot of my friends who are walking through hard things. And we're going to be giving a copy away on the podcast for this book. Now, it actually releases, this episode's going to come out before it releases. So, what are the pre-order, like if someone wants to order ahead of time? It comes out June 30th,
Comes
and
out
our
June 30th.
episode,
I am actually just sharing the pre-order bonuses today. So this is so exciting. It will be up and ready for you when you go to lisaappelo.com / God of Comfort. And on that book page, you will see a place to get all the pre-order bonuses. There are two that I'm just so excited about. One is I collaborated with a missionary and an artist who hand illustrated that Garden of Grief poem. So you
Oh
can
my
print that out,
goodness.
and she added the verse from one Psalm 126, 5 and 6. So you can print that out with her hand illustration all around it, and
Oh, I love that.
frame it or keep it as a phone screen. It's just beautiful. And then the second one is a very practical resource I made that is steps, scientific and scripture and scientific backed steps through grief. So practices is called Rhythms of Rest. And it's just a downloadable. They're very practical ways. I'll give you one. So, talking about flowers, did you know that science has actually shown us that flowers actually lower our stress hormone and increase our endorphins, our feel good hormones? So, you working in the garden this morning, you thought you were
I
just
did.
pulling weeds. But if you take some of those flowers and you put them in your home, just having those flowers in your homes, you pick them up at the grocery store, bring a bouquet to somebody who's hurting, pick them at the roadside, whatever you do, having that little bouquet of flowers is a simple way that science shows will decrease our hormone.
I love that. Yeah, in your other book, Life Could Be Good Again, you talk about how tears have actually a scientific. So hopefully there's something about that in there too. I'm going to let you guys get the pre-orders to find out all the goodies. And the Grief of Garden visual, like I am so excited for that one because that Grief Garden really spoke, like not spoke to me, but resonated with me. That's the word I want to use. Resonated with me in such a powerful way. So to have a beautiful little picture and stuff, Lisa, that is so, so special. Well, once again, it's been such a joy to have you on the podcast. Your third time, I just love it. We're friends in real life. We talk and text, and I just love you,
Yeah.
friend. And I'm so proud of you. You are really helping those struggling in grief. So, God of Comfort is a must read, and it's one that I think you need to give to all your friends as well. So, thanks, Lisa, for coming on and sharing your wisdom today.
I appreciate you, Jody. I appreciate you so much. Thank you for having me on.
Aw, thanks. I appreciate you too.